The snow fell so heavily that no one wanted to leave their house that day. But Margaret, an older woman living alone, still walked out with her cane to take out the trash as usual. Beside the cold trash can was an old backpack. There was no one around. No sound, only a trembling, silent gaze watching her through the zipper gap. That was the first time she met Bella, and the beginning of an unexpected journey. The snow fell thickly that morning, covering every sound like a white blanket. Margaret, an older woman living alone at the end of the old street, hunched her back to pull the trash can through the slippery path. Her wrinkled hands, wearing old woolen gloves, moved slowly but steadily as if she had done this her whole life. But today, something was different. Beside the trash can, amidst the fresh snow, lay an old, dark green backpack. Out of place, soaked, lying sideways as if someone had hurriedly discarded it. There was no one around. No footsteps, no tire tracks. The snow continued to fall, covering all traces. She was about to walk past, but the zipper was slightly open, just enough as if someone wanted to reveal something inside without completely leaving. She stopped, hesitated, then bent down, trembling, and gently pulled the zipper further open. And her heart suddenly tightened. Inside, a puppy curled up, soaked, trembling like a leaf in a storm. Its eyes were wide open, not barking, not whining, just staring directly at her, with an expression as if it had been waiting for this moment its whole life. As if it knew that if she didn't stop, no one else would. Almost instinctively, she placed her hand on the backpack. It was warm, not from heat, but from the emotions surging within her chest. That feeling she hadn't had since her husband passed away 10 years ago, and her children never came back for the holidays. In the backpack's side pocket was a small, damp paper, the ink smudged in places. But she could still read the trembling, scrawled words. "The name of the little one is Bella. I'm sorry. Please be kind to her. She's perfect." And at that very moment, like a slow-motion film, Bella looked up at her and sighed as if releasing its final fear. Margaret didn't say anything. She gently lifted the entire backpack and held it close to her chest. Perhaps she had no longer felt the chill in her heart for the first time in many cold winters. She didn't know what had happened. She didn't need to know at that moment. But one thing she was certain of: the little one could not be left here. Not today. Not while it was still alive. Margaret placed Bella in an old basket lined with woolen cloth beside the fireplace. The small house was warm with the faint scent of mint tea, and the crackling fire in the stove seemed like a comforting lullaby. But Bella didn't move. It didn't lick its paws. It didn't look around. It simply curled up in a defensive position, its eyes still fixed on the door as if it would open at any moment, and what it was waiting for would appear. She placed a bowl of food next to it, warm chicken pâté with a few sausage pieces she often used to treat the stray cats that came by the garden. The scent was so strong that even the lazy cats couldn't resist. But Bella didn't. It didn't sniff. It didn't lick. It didn't move. 1 day, 2 days. 3 days passed. No change. On the third night, Margaret stayed awake, listening to Bella's heavy breathing, occasionally twitching as if dreaming of something very far or painful. Her heart began to fear. That Wednesday morning, she couldn't wait any longer. Even though the snow was still thick, she wrapped Bella in a large woolen scarf, placed her in a basket, and caught the bus to the veterinary clinic 2 blocks away. Her hands trembled as she put Bella on the examination table. Bella still didn't respond, only shuddering slightly when the vet checked the scratched paw, The thin skin reddened from the cold. After nearly half an hour of examination, the vet, an older man with a sorrowful look in his eyes, sat down beside her and softly said, "She's not severely injured. There's no disease. It's more like she's mentally collapsed." "Mental collapse?" Margaret gasped. "Yes, she doesn't seem interested in food, warmth, or life. If this continues, she may not make it." Margaret fell silent. The air in the room suddenly thickened like smoke. No one spoke for a long while. Bella, the dog once placed in a backpack like an abandoned item, was now lying quietly in her arms, like the last leaf in winter gently trembling in the wind. And in that moment, Margaret realized Bella wasn't just cold. She wasn't just hungry. She was waiting. She was waiting for her owner. She gently tightened her embrace and thought to herself, "If the little one can wait, then I won't let go." That afternoon, while cleaning out the backpack to remove the frozen mud, Margaret accidentally found a small item deep in a side pocket, wedged inside. An old-school keychain shaped like a star, chipped paint, but still clearly engraved with the letters, Eli. She gripped the item tightly, her heart beating faster than usual. This may be the only clue to trace the story behind this dog. That evening, Margaret began calling and emailing animal rescue stations, social work offices, and the administration offices of 3 nearby elementary schools. Some places rejected her, while others said they would look into it. But on the 3rd morning, the phone rang. "Hello, this is Linda from the Community Support Office. You're looking for a boy named Eli, right?" Margaret held her breath. "Yes. Eli. I found a dog. It might belong to him." The voice on the other end grew somber. "Eli used to live around here with his uncle, but recently he was placed into a foster family due to domestic abuse." There was a heavy silence. "He's 11 years old. Very quiet. But he did mention a dog named Bella. He said it was the last good thing he had." Those words made Margaret choke up. It felt like something inside her shattered. Still curled up in the blanket by the fire, Bella's eyes closed, occasionally twitching in her sleep. She was no longer an unnamed, abandoned dog. She was the remaining piece of a child's childhood. She was a friend. The one thing that the boy could not bring with him when he was forced to leave. A part of Eli remained in that old backpack. Margaret stood silently for a long time in front of the misted window. She didn't know who Eli was or what he looked like. But she knew one thing. If there was something she could do, she had to do it. Even if it was just to find a piece of memory. Even if it was only to tell Eli that Bella was still here, and she had never stopped waiting. The gate to the center opened in the middle of a snow-heavy afternoon. Margaret stepped out of the car, holding the old blanket wrapped around Bella's thin body. The little one lay still, eyes wide open, as if sensing something approaching. And then, from the backyard, a voice broke through the silence. "Bella!" A boy darted out like an arrow straight into the heart of the moment. Eli, his messy hair, shoes untied, and his eyes, clear but filled with the weight of years apart. He fell onto the snow as Bella leaped out of Margaret's arms, dashing toward him like the arrow of fate. They embraced each other, never letting go, curling up like they had never been apart. "I'm sorry," Eli sobbed, holding Bella's face tightly. "I promised I'd come back. I had no other choice. I didn't want to leave you." Bella didn't bark, didn't whimper. She pressed her head to Eli's chest, as if listening to the familiar heartbeat she had etched into her memory. Her eyes, wet with snow, never left him for a second. Margaret stood still, her hand tightly gripping the empty backpack where Bella used to curl up inside. The scene made her heart break in silence. But then, in the warmth of the reunion, a voice spoke, softly but heavily, as if 1,000 pounds weighed it down. "Eli's new family can't have pets, at least not in the beginning," the social worker spoke, her gaze filled with sympathy. The whole yard went quiet. Eli held Bella tighter, his lips trembling. Why? No one answered. No one wanted to break that moment. Bella, seemingly understanding, didn't react. She simply remained still in the boy's arms, as if trying to capture every scent, every breath, before she had to turn away once more. Margaret approached and placed a hand on Eli's shoulder. "I'll take care of Bella for you until you're ready." Her voice trembled, but it was firm. Eli didn't say anything, just nodded through his choked sobs, and Bella, for the first time after all the long days of waiting, gently licked his cheek, softly, as if making a promise. The car slowly moved through the heavy snowstorm, leaving blurry tire tracks behind. But Bella was no longer curled up in the old backpack this time. She sat beside Margaret in the passenger seat, her head resting on her lap, her brown eyes filled with a soft sadness as she gazed out at the frosted window. Margaret didn't say anything, gently stroking her frail, fur-covered back. Her hands were rough, trembling from age, but each movement was unusually tender, like she was comforting a piece of a memory that wasn't hers. The car arrived at the house. Margaret opened the door, and Bella entered for the second time. This time not with a fearful gaze, but with a look of gratitude. That evening, Margaret prepared a small corner by the fireplace, setting down a warm blanket and a soft pillow. But Bella didn't go there. She quietly walked over to Margaret's armchair, curling up at her feet as if it were the only safe place. Margaret put her book down and looked down at her. She saw Bella sleep without shivering, whimpering, or jerking awake at night for the first time in the soft yellow light. Her breathing was steady and calm, as if the storm inside had finally settled. She bent down and softly whispered, perhaps to herself, or maybe to Eli, "You won't come back, will you? But I'll be here, as long as it takes." There was no reply. Only the soft sniffles in her dreams, then quiet, gave way to deep sleep. In that place where there was no more cold, no more parting. Only an older woman silently keeping a promise for someone else, and a puppy, no longer waiting, but still knowing it was loved. In the days that followed, Margaret's house felt different, not because of the loud barking or the chaos of a puppy, but because of how Bella was present. Gentle, slow, yet full of warmth, like the thin winter sunlight streaming through the old curtains. At first, Bella still kept to her quiet ways. She didn't make a mess, didn't bark. She just followed Margaret step by step, like a little shadow. When Margaret went to the garden to water the plants, Bella rested on the wooden steps. When Margaret read her books, Bella lay beside her feet, her eyes half closed. When Margaret cooked, she silently sat behind her, just to make sure Margaret wouldn't disappear. But then, small changes began to happen. One morning, when Margaret had just woken up, she heard a soft clattering sound from the living room. Stepping out, she found Bella, carrying her slipper from the door to the sofa, wanting to help, even though she didn't know how. Bella looked at her, tail gently wagging. For the first time, Margaret smiled warmly and said, "Thank you, little one." Bella stretched up and lightly licked the back of her hand, a gesture that had never happened before. Then came the time for a walk. Margaret took out the leash, not expecting much, as Bella had always retreated to a corner whenever she saw it. But this time, when Margaret opened the door, Bella stepped out onto the porch and turned back to look at her as if to say, "Where are we going today, Grandma?" Life had returned, not rushed, not suddenly. Day by day, Bella's eyes became clearer, her steps firmer, her breathing more regular. What moved Margaret the most was one winter afternoon when she was dozing in her armchair. Bella gently climbed onto the sofa, resting her head on Margaret's shoulder. A dog that once slept in a backpack in the cold now trusted in the warmth of another. An older woman who had lived alone now had a reason to wake up early every morning. Neither spoke a word, but both knew they were healing each other. One snowy afternoon, as the snowflakes drifted outside the window, Margaret checked the mailbox, a habit she had kept for many years, mostly finding bills or advertisements. But this time, a small envelope lay among the old papers. The handwriting was childlike, shaky yet neat. To Miss Margaret and Bella. Her heart beat a little faster. Bella, lying on the rug, lifted her head when she heard the paper rustling. Inside the envelope was a folded sheet of paper with neat but somewhat shaky handwriting at the top. "I am Eli. Thank you for taking care of Bella. I don't know who you are, but Bella knows, and I miss Bella every night. I don't dare ask, but if you let me write a letter, I would be thrilled. Here is a picture of me and Bella. Could you please put it near where she sleeps?" Along with it was an old, somewhat blurry photo, clearly showing a young boy holding a puppy on a patch of grass. Bella was much smaller back then, with fluffy fur and sparkling eyes, and Eli was smiling, a smile that Margaret had never seen on his face during their reunion. She held the photo up in front of Bella. The golden shepherd stared at it momentarily, then gently touched her nose to the picture, and at that moment, Margaret burst into tears. That night, the photo was carefully framed and placed on the small wooden shelf beside Bella's bed. Before going to bed, Margaret opened her pen and set the paper on the table, writing, "Dear Eli, I think. Bella is smiling." A few weeks later, as the winter began to soften, Margaret's phone rang while she was watering the small plants on the windowsill. On the other end was the gentle voice of a woman. "I'm Sarah, Eli's foster mother. Sorry for calling unexpectedly, but Eli said you wouldn't mind." Margaret smiled. "Not at all. Please go ahead." Sarah hesitated for a moment, then spoke gently. "Actually, after adopting Eli, we hadn't planned on having pets. But ever since he saw Bella again, he's been different. He eats more. He smiles more. I've never seen a look in Eli's eyes like his one for Bella." Her voice caught. "We're not ready to permanently adopt Bella. But Eli wants to visit her if you agree. Just one afternoon. Just to hold her paw." Margaret was silent for a while. Her heart softened, not because of the plea, but because of the quiet, deep bond between two souls too young to endure separation. That day, Margaret prepared Bella a red scarf and a batch of homemade dog biscuits. She placed Bella in the car, whispering, "Today, you don't need to look through the window anymore. I know exactly where we're taking you." Eli was waiting at the gate when they arrived at the small house outside town. He didn't rush out or shout. He just walked slowly, his hands trembling. Bella stepped down. There was no need for a call or a guide. She ran to him, not in a rush, gently curling up in Eli's arms as if there had never been a day apart. Sarah stood there, hands tightly clasped, silent tears running down her face. Margaret didn't intrude. She stepped back, her hand resting over her chest, because in that moment, she knew, though she had cared for Bella, the dog's heart had always belonged here. Eli handed Margaret a small bag. "I made this in craft class. It's a heart-shaped keychain, like the old one from Bella's backpack. But this time I carved Bella and home." Margaret took it, her heart filled with a strange feeling, not pain, sadness, or gratitude. A week later, Eli's new family sent a message. "We've settled in. If you agree, we're ready to adopt Bella again." Margaret read the message, her hands trembling slightly. She turned to Bella, who was curled up by the window, where the rare winter sunlight peeked through the trees. She didn't say anything. She just walked over, gently stroking the back of the little dog who had once huddled in that old backpack. 2 days later, they got in the car. Eli was already waiting at the gate, tightly holding the old scarf with Bella's name. The boy could hardly believe it when he saw Margaret lift Bella out of the back seat. "Bella." Eli's voice trembled, his eyes misty. Bella stretched out of Margaret's arms, running towards him. But this time, it wasn't in haste. No jumping, no rushing. She simply stood quietly before Eli, staring at him for a long while. Eli bent down, opening his arms wide, and Bella moved towards him, not in a leap, but gently resting her forehead on his chest. After a moment, Bella took a step back. She turned her head, looking at Margaret. The older woman remained where she stood. No calls, no waving hands, just holding her coat pocket tightly, hiding her emotions. Eli understood. "I know," he said, smiling sadly, resting his head on Bella one last time. "You've found your home, and the person there needs you too." Bella didn't look back again. She turned, returning to Margaret, a choice that no one forced. It was simply a heart's decision. Since that day, Bella no longer stayed in the corner of the room. She began the habit of waiting by the window for Margaret every morning and walking with her in the garden every afternoon, even though the garden was still covered with snow and the flowers hadn't yet bloomed after winter. One morning, while making tea, Margaret couldn't help but laugh when she saw Bella bringing her a pair of furry slippers, the same ones she always wore when it was cold. "So, you mean, it's time now?" Margaret chuckled. Bella gently wagged her tail and strolled towards the armchair, waiting for Margaret to sit with her. Every week, Eli continued to write letters. He shared stories from his new school and sent drawings, with Bella always featured, accompanied by the small note, "She's still my hero." Margaret kept each letter in a small wooden box. She never showed anyone or talked about it, but every time she read them, she smiled, her eyes lighting up as if she had become decades younger. One day, in a paper bag left at the doorstep, was a small wooden sign with the words engraved, "Bella, the chosen one, the one who chose, and the one who warms the winter." Margaret hung it at the entrance beside a pot of white chrysanthemums. From that day on, whenever the neighbors passed by, they would stop to pat Bella's head, then smile at each other. No one spoke of the past again, but everyone understood. The little dog once left by the trash had now become a symbol of hope, and the proud choice of a heart that had once been broken. The trash once left some dogs. Some children hugged them and silently said, "Wait, I'll come back." There are older women with no one left to wait for, but quietly becoming a place where a small soul can find refuge and be trusted again. Bella was not just a dog that was rescued. She proves that no one is invisible if someone is patient enough to look for a long time. And Margaret chose to do just that. Without fanfare, without applause, It was simply choosing to stay.